Just a quick update or a quick explanation of how we got into the space. So New York League of Conservation Voters, we're a nonpartisan environmental organization. We do advocacy and lobbying and all sorts of things. We also do political endorsements and activity. And as part of our candidate evaluation and endorsement process, about 6 years ago, things had changed as how we were evaluating state and federal candidates. We were starting to use scorecards that everyone knows what a scorecard is in terms of accountability issue stuff to help guide our endorsement processes. And so we started that process in 2018. And in 2019, when we were starting to do local evaluations, we realized, well, we don't really have an equal accountability measure for towns and cities and counties, and we didn't have scorecards really available. And so we had thought, well, why don't we try to use something that all towns and counties and cities should be working on, which is, the Climate Smart Communities program. So we started off just that year in our interview process, talking with incumbents and challengers about the program and seeing if they're participating or not, that sort of thing. And those are interesting conversations, and we learned a little bit more. And we did it again in 2021, and we realized, like, okay, this is getting to be a conversation that we're having, and we're kind of starting to track, people that are applying for endorsement, whatever correlation there was between that measurable action. Because I think the issue we were having prior to this was, people were walking in and they were saying, oh, I'm for the environment, I do all these random wonderful things. It was hard to really pin them down specifically on discrete, measurable, and most importantly, impactful actions. And now and at that point, obviously with the CLCPA coming on board, it became even more important to show that they were actually doing the things that were additive and measurable and accountable and all that. So what we decided was that, okay, to kind of ramp up our understanding of this, we wanted to do a much deeper dive on the program itself and understand it, so that the next time we went around the sun in terms of asking candidates about in 2023, this past year, for communities that were registered and not yet certified, we wanted to visit them after the election to kind of like drill down on, like, so what's the deal? Like, where are you at in terms of your certification? Because we were seeing a range of some communities that got registered in 2009 and like nothing was happening, and some that got registered like a couple of years ago and they were getting certified. And so that required us to take a little bit of a pause, in terms of that. And we spent, Ella, who I'm going to introduce right now, spent the last year-ish kind of coming up with those presentations, the research and the analysis, and now we've started to make those presentations this first quarter of 2024. So let me wind it back and hand it off to Ella so she can show you a little bit about what she's been putting together at a high level for the organization internally, but then also just a sample presentation that we've been giving. We just gave one this morning to the city of Rensselaer that we've been giving to communities in areas where we work. And I forgot to mention that currently we only do this in 7 counties, and we're going to be expanding to 10 counties. So there are like 47 on the table that we're not getting to yet. But in time we'll get there. And those counties are on Long Island. It's Westchester County, and it's the Capital Region, Albany, Schenectady, Rensselaer, and Saratoga. And we're going to be expanding to Central Western New York, as we define as Onondaga, Erie, and Monroe. So let me hand it off to Ella to share her awesome research.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So I'm going to share with you guys today a sample presentation. This one is from Rensselaer, who, as Josh mentioned, we met with this morning. So this is a presentation that we give to registered communities who we're engaging with discussions about climate smart communities with. So this is kind of the overview that Josh gave, so I'll just skip that. So as Josh mentioned, some of our goals are that by 2026, all 7 counties, 16 cities, and 80 towns on Long Island, Westchester, and the Capital Region, and any new chapter areas will have drastically slashed or achieved net zero GHG emissions. And so as a part of that, to kind of as working towards an accountability measure, we're using the program. And so some of our objectives were kind of to develop an understanding of any common experiences or best practices exhibited by certified municipalities, and then creating community resources and tools based on those research findings to kind of help assist in the certification process. So around the state, there's about a 25% participation in the program with 400 registered communities, 10 of which are silver certified and 122 which are bronze certified. And that results in about 1,184 that are not participating. So on a regional level, in these chapter areas that Josh mentioned, and sorry, this excludes villages because it's outside of our own strategic goal, just something to note. So in Long Island, it's about 100% participation, and then moving on to Westchester, it's about like an 80-20. And then in the capital region and in Erie, Monroe, and Onondaga, it's a similar split. It's about like 60-40 in terms of participating, not participating. And then we kind of give a more localized context. So this is an example from Rensselaer County. They don't currently have any certified communities in Rensselaer, but we're working on that. And so as you guys are all familiar, there are these kind of 12 pledge elements, and there's this whole suite of actions that falls under these 12 categories. So we wanted to take a look and see if there was any sort of trends within those 100 actions, if there was any sort of commonalities in terms of which actions that different municipality types chose. So we put together this list, and this is to be on this list, any one type of municipality had to, at least 30% had to choose that action. And so we also took a look at it in terms of comparing across municipality types, if there was anything, if there's anything in the data that suggested like, oh, okay, this is a much more common action for counties versus cities or towns. And one example that we like to give is PACE financing, very popular among counties, about 65% chose that action. However, towns, it's only about 5.8%. So we wanted to make a little more data-driven kind of recommendations when we're talking to registered communities, and something that's maybe a little bit more manageable or something like a starting point for them. So we put together a sort of a top actions list. So this is an example of certified cities. So these kind of top 25 actions would get you to that bronze certification, and these are kind of the most popular actions among cities. And we've also included the average amount of points that cities receive for these actions. So for some instances, it's not so helpful because there's a fixed amount of points, but in others, like for instance, solar energy, there's like a huge amount of points available, but maybe depending on the size of the solar array, it's not always common that cities will get all of those points. And then when we speak to communities, we like to kind of put more personalized information in terms of what they're already working on, maybe, and in regards to like clean energy community actions, how that fits into that kind of top action list, to kind of demonstrate that they're already working on, already making strides in terms of their certification. So this is just kind of an extension of that side. And we interviewed about a dozen, certified coordinators around the state from different municipality types to see sort of what they recommended, what their advice was, what their experience was with the process. And they gave us these kind of 6 points that came up frequently. Just some of them are very self-explanatory: reviewing and identifying previous actions that the municipality has already worked on, identifying low-hanging fruit, so where there's grant funding available, aligning actions with municipal priorities. So if they already have established priorities or they have existing resources, such as like a climate action plan, it's very helpful for them to just kind of fit the climate smart communities actions into that existing priority. And in smaller communities where the task force is volunteer-based, it's very helpful for them to use the Climate Smart Communities program as sort of a framework for prioritizing actions. In addition, external resources were hugely valuable for completing certification. Communities will utilize higher educational partnerships. So one example that we like to give is Colgate University. They had like a lot of seminar work through the college, and they helped the Hamilton town and village become certified. So, utilizing those educational partnership relationships, nonprofit organizations, across the board, everyone said that the regional coordinators were very, very helpful. And then interns and volunteers. And finally, just leveraging the relationship between the Clean Energy Community Program and the Climate Smart Communities Program to sort of get that dual points. And then another thing that we've worked on is a story map. So there is obviously a huge geographic component to this. So we wanted to create some sort of geographic resources that can demonstrate sort of what the status is around the state. So I'll just give it a second to load. So this is the status of registered and certified communities. Specifically, this is counties around the state. And the darker the green, we really leaned into it. So the darker the green, the higher the certification. So this is for counties, as I said, about 31 participating currently. And then this is that same participation, but this is at the town level. So you can see there's quite a geographic relationship in terms of which towns are participating. There's, all of Long Island is participating in terms of towns, and then the farther north and the farther west you go, the less common the participation is, except there's a little cluster in Tompkins County. So moving on to cities, it's not always helpful to look at just the boundaries for cities. So we've also added some population data. So you can look at both the participation status and the size of the city. So currently, in terms of cities, it's the highest percentage of participation. And then finally, we use the same data, the same kind of measure for villages. So looking at participating villages around the state with that same population data. So we've also done some dashboards for specific regions, as Josh mentioned in our chapter areas. So this is an example of Long Island, and you can see here that there's, like I mentioned, 100% participation in counties, towns, and cities. And then when you click on the map, you can also see the registration date, and if they were certified, how many points they got, when their certification expires. And then we've also included the same information in list format. And you can click on the community and it'll pop up on the map in case you're not familiar with all the villages in Long Island. And then we've also done the same breakdown for Westchester. And Westchester has actually the highest concentration of silver certified communities. You can see here, sorry, it takes a second to load. And the same thing, when you click on the map, it'll pop up. In Hastings-on-Hudson, I believe it's the community with the highest number of points at a whopping 449. And then finally, the last one we've done is the capital region. And there's quite a significant geographic distribution for certifications, kind of all clustered around Albany. And then the farther you move out, the less common it is. Yeah, so that is all we had for you guys today.
Yeah, just to reiterate, so that first presentation, that's something we're actively doing with the communities in the chapters where we operate around the state, Long Island, Westchester, Central and Western New York, and soon now it's going to be actually parts of Central and Western New York. The top line encouragement there is to say, hey, listen, only 25% of communities statewide are participating in some form or fashion. So it's a pretty elite group, and the fact that your community is already registered means you're doing well. But trying to give them encouragement by looking at, and what Ella did was by looking at 100 other examples of certified communities to kind of give them the information of like, listen, 100 communities have done it before you, and here's what they've done, and here are ways you can learn from them to make it much much easier. That second presentation in terms of the story map, that stuff we're just using internally for ourselves, just to kind of, again, keep ourselves honest in terms of how we're doing in terms of reaching our strategic goals. But it definitely helps to have these, and all that data is from DEC. So it helps to, visualize all this, and it helps to tell the story. And I think hopefully, we'll be in a position where, outside of the areas where we're working, maybe other groups on this call, or other people on this call in their regions where we're not active, might try to employ similar kinds of tactics, maybe reaching out to registered communities, sharing with them information about what a common pathway would be towards certification based on past certifications, and find a way to engage them. What we're doing with these communities, by the way, is that we're meeting with those communities now, this first quarter. And we're going to be employing the charm offensive, in that every quarter we're going to check in. So how, after we make the presentation, after we get some other information from them as to where they're at and what difficulties we're having, we're just going to be bugging them every few months. In a nice way, in a charming way. Like, how's it going? Have you picked a date yet that you're going to put in the application? Just to kind of keep it top of mind, because what we've been finding, interestingly, is sort of a range for the communities that became registered, more recently, is more top of mind, and they may have more of a handle on things. Whereas ones that perhaps registered back in 2009, a lot of things have happened, and it's just a matter of people who are just sort of like, oh yeah, we're kind of aware of this, but it kind of fell off the wagon. So, and like, we're kind of reorienting them with all that. So in both cases it's useful, but and hopefully, within the time that we spend together over the course of the year, we can let you know of some success stories, that we've had. I can tell you of a few, just because we reached out. We've been learning a lot of stuff, but some of the communities we spoke to said, oh, we're actually going to be, applying next week, or we'll be applying next quarter. We're starting to learn, more and more about what activities are, which is also useful information. The other useful information that we're starting to extract from these communities, which is why we're so glad to be part of this network, is very quickly we're going to get to questions and things that are beyond our ken, in which case we've been telling them, don't worry, we'll find people who we can connect you with. We're now part of a statewide network of experts who can maybe help you with finding the right vendor for this, or how to actually work the DEC website and do the paperwork, or whatever it might be. And so it seems like a useful way to kind of be a conduit for all the expertise on this call, much of which we don't have, but at least we know the data. So there is a point of connection there. So.
And Josh, thank you. And this is a perfect example of what we wanted from this network, is sharing information, learning from others, and having questions and engaging. So we could do one of two things. I have some questions here in the chat that I'll ask, or you could raise your hand, either one that works for you if you want to speak. But Amanda just wants everybody to know that regarding PACE financing, it isn't something towns outside of Westchester County can enable. So that's why there's this low for towns on that one. Dazzle has a couple questions. Could you share links? I was going to ask you that too. If you could share, would you mind sharing the presentation? It was so small, I couldn't really read so much of it. That's just my eyesight. But also she was asking if you could share the links to the maps and dashboards. And then how often is the data on the CSCs updated? And what's the long-term plan for the league's work on climate smart communities?
So the answers to those first few questions are, first question is yes, we'll share everything. Ella can answer the second question. I'll do the third question. How often are you updating this, Ella?
As frequently as the certifications are updated.
So Dazzle, just keep making your data fresh, and we'll just keep updating our information. And our long-term plan. So Ella had a slide there where, by 2026, it's part of our strategic plan in the 7 counties that we are working in currently. So Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Albany, Rensselaer, Schenectady, Saratoga. I think what we're trying to get is 100% participation by 2026 in some form or fashion. And then by the time we do our next strategic plan, we're going to try to then scale those communities up that aren't quite certified to be certified. But our goal is to really, as we have every 5 years when our board does their strategic plan, to have a higher and higher aspiration so that at some point, the next strategic plan or two, we can get, at least in the areas where we work, and again, we're not in all 62 counties, we're only working in, at this point, 10, to at least try to get 100% participation in terms of certification. So at least we're doing our fair share of work, and obviously we have a much larger network to work with the other 47 counties, but that's what we're trying to do in terms of our long term. We want to make sure that every community in all of our 10 county areas are all certified.
Great. And Amanda has another question. Curious if you plan on doing a similar analysis with the CEC program.
No. We have our hands full with this one, but we are constantly advocating and cross-referencing and encouraging people and say, hey, listen, if you've been doing CEC, that's great news, because the CEC and CSC are becoming closer and closer together as time goes on, in terms of reciprocity, in terms of grants, in terms of technical stuff. So we're just telling people, keep on keeping on. This is good stuff. We're not, but we're going to be focused on CSC for the foreseeable future, because that's pretty hefty enough.
Great. Simon believes that his town of Bedford in Westchester County has edged out Hastings for the highest level reached in New York State. Excellent, Simon.
I think the mayor of Hastings will probably not only dispute that, but probably challenge the supervisor of the Bedford to like a arm wrestle or something to, fight over that title. Westchester is a very competitive, in a good way, a very competitive.
I'll be happy to send you the article that it came from.
Simon, I believe that's the Clean Energy Communities Program, which they're also neck and neck and fighting in. But the Climate Smart, the Hastings has the most points of any community in the state still.
Okay, appreciate the clarification.
And Eleanor, can you just introduce yourself real quick? You jumped on a little late.
Yes, sorry, I'm late. I'm Eleanor Peck. I'm the Clean Energy Communities coordinator for the Mid-Hudson region, or a coordinator for the Mid-Hudson region.
Thank you. And Joe says incredible work, Ella, and Dazzle thanks you for the insight. And Melissa, love it. Melissa says this connects with the question I raised. Good to see the presence of the CSC staff and coordinators here. How in practice will you be sorting out swim lanes, messaging, etc., with the local coordinators? I know you intend in principle, but in practice it is tricky. Great question.
That question for me?
Yes.
Yeah. That's your
Are we-
big idea, dude.
Are we going swimming? Well, that's a big question in terms of the overall practice here. In terms of our intent, I mean, again, we've started doing this in terms of having an excuse to follow up with municipalities where we're doing electoral work after the fact. So to make sure that before they run for election the next time, that they follow their campaign pledges, or at least the pledges that they made to us when they were screening for their endorsement, that yes, of course, in my next term we'll become certified. So we're very narrowly focused in that, and we're also very narrowly focused in the geographical areas. I think our intention is that, though, as we develop these relationships with these communities, and they say, we've hit a wall and we need help with X. At that point, again, we know what we know, and we certainly know what we don't know, would be to then try to help them get that information. There's stuff, that we can refer to them on the DEC website, or to reach out to a coordinator, or reach out to whomever, but to just to really encourage them to reach out to the network of experts that we're now connected with. Because, we're just trying to give them sort of a one piece of the puzzle in terms of like, here's a short list. If you wanted to prioritize and focus out of the 100 actions, here are the 25 that are most commonly done by certified communities. What we often say is, you probably have your own list, which is great. Look at our list, look at your list, see where the overlap is, and it might make sense where there's overlap, maybe to go for it a little bit harder if you're not doing so already. And if not, kind of figure out what your adventure is. So, but we haven't gotten to the point yet where people have come to us with like, except in one instance where it was, I've got all this information, I just don't know how to upload it to the website itself. I'm having trouble. So he was talking to somebody local on Long Island, about that. So, yeah, I don't have any grander vision other than trying to engage with these communities and kind of learn where they're at and how we can help them by moving forward.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Melissa, or that?
I mean, I think it's really more just for dialogue between the programs, and the organizations that are most directly involved. I think it's worth carefulness, that's all.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, because I just to jump in, I think, in the Mid-Hudson, we've worked closely with, New York League of Conservation Voters in the past. We held an event with you all last year with Nia Rhodes Jackson. But I think I have a little bit of hesitation, not with anything you said. I think everything you said sounds great, but I do worry a little bit, being part of this network as a CSC coordinator and CEC coordinator, right? Like, we are funded by state agencies to help promote these programs, right? And I think our role is a little bit different than the advocacy organizations. And I do want to be careful, right, that we're not seen as partnering. I mean, we partner with advocacy organizations in a lot of ways, but I do want to be a little bit careful that we're not, as state contractors, partnering or being seen as pushing elected officials to do things that, through the lobbying arm of New York League, like that.
None of this is done through our 501c4. This is a 100% done through our 501c3 entity, New York League Conservation Education Fund. So there's no mistake when we reach out. Everything has nothing to do with elections, lobbying, advocacy whatsoever. It's all being done through our 501c3 entity for those particular reasons, so that there's no level of concern or discomfort there.
Yeah, actually, if I could just chime in with the piece, from my perspective, observing some of the really painstaking work that the coordinators put into, come on. Sometimes the home rule sentiment, the we want to do it our way thing, there's a good to that, and a lot of the community leaders, it's very painstaking, ongoing cultivation to get to a yes. Sometimes that gets stagnant, and maybe a kick in the butt is helpful, but I trust that you will work closely with the coordinators in whatever places you are making moves, and kind of make sure you've got their current guidance about where the political sensitivities are. That's an easy yes.
Well, we are working with communities that we currently have relationships with, first of all, and second of all, in all cases, when we meet with them and after the fact, we are absolutely promoting that they should be in touch with, if they're not already, with their local CSC coordinators, with the DEC directly, or whomever might be in their community. And some of them are aware of that. I heard Sarah Earle's name a lot during the course of some of the meetings that we've had, and like, oh yeah, we're working with Sarah on these particular technical things, or I'm working with Andrew Mannett, or like whatever. And we say, great, keep doing that. This is not meant to supplant or replace anything. It's just really, we just did a little bit of specific data as to what certified communities have done that might be useful for you to compare to what you're planning, and keep doing what you're doing with all the help you need. But if you do need more help, let us know, and we'll reach out to the network that we're involved with, because we're not the technical group, but we're grateful to have a large group like this to be able to reach out to, that says, hey, town of Babylon needs X, or the town of whatever needs Y. Can anyone help them out? Because we're not going to offer advice or enter into anything that we have a very, very narrow scope.
Great. Brad has his hand up, and then Dan, I'm sorry, I'll go to you up next.
Well, I just want to make the point that, what the New York League of Conservation Voters is doing here, kind of nudging these communities along, either they maybe haven't had a lot of participation in the past, or maybe they have, and they are getting pushed to go further than they would otherwise. I mean, that seems to me helpful in advancing the work. And there's so many powerhouse organizations on this call. And I just can't help but think that, if you're a municipal official out in the capital region, for example, you know, you might get an email from the Capital District Regional Planning or Commission, you know, you might hear about things here and there. But like, what if you were hearing from a lot of these different organizations that they'd like to see you do these things? It would seem like that would kind of maybe garner some urgency and maybe help to advance it. So I'm looking at this network as like, to what extent can it be an organized way of sort of like doing some of that nudging, you know, and not getting in the way of the coordinators or the programs, but just helping to make sure that everybody understands these are